Welcome to the Vintage Athlete Podcast, specially designed for retired athletes. I'm your host, Tara Fortier. I'm a master's level licensed and board certified behavior analyst, yoga and meditation teacher, nutrition coach, and now mom of 2 athletes. But most importantly, I'm just like you, a retired athlete doing life after sports. Whether it's trying new things that you might be bad at, learning how to feed and exercise your post-sport body without kicking your own butt, or figuring out how to fill that giant hole in your life that used to be filled with practices, coaches, teammates, and the adrenaline rush of your sport, I'm going to drop some unconventional knowledge and strategies on you and do it from a place of love and acceptance. We'll tackle solutions from a unique perspective rooted in mindfulness and acceptance and commitment therapy. If you're a retired athlete looking to create a fulfilling and empowered life beyond your sport, this show is for you. This is the Vintage Athlete Podcast, your game plan for life after sports. So lace up for your next adventure and we'll transition, redefine, and evolve together. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Vintage Athlete Podcast. I am super excited to be talking to you today about this topic. The topic of the podcast today is the behavioral science behind why retired athletes suck at setting and achieving non-sport goals. So that's our topic for today. And I have the opportunity here to get a little nerdy behavior analyst on you, and there's nothing I love more. So I'm super excited to talk about this today and hopefully give you some strategies and some things to take away from it that can help you if you are feeling frustrated about this particular topic. So let's get into it. Retiring from sports marks the end of an era for athletes. And so while it's the end of an era, it's also the start of a new one, right? One that is your life after sports. And sometimes that can be filled with uncertainty and confusion. And so I want to talk about ways that we can get past that and you can live a fulfilling and meaningful life after sports. So I'll ask you this. Did you have very clear and defined goals as an athlete? I know I did. Maybe you had a PR you wanted to achieve or a championship you wanted your team to win, or maybe it was to reach a certain competitive level in your sport. So you likely had these very clear, defined goals. So in theory, it should be easy to set goals for yourself outside of sports, right? But maybe it's not. And often it's not. And now in retirement, this really can be a struggle for a former athlete, having no idea what goals to set in other areas of their lives. It seems so easy in sports. You knew what you wanted to accomplish and you went for it. And now it's like crickets. Or maybe you do have non-sport goals and you really struggle with being consistent in order to accomplish them. So why doesn't this goal-setting skill easily transfer to life after sports? From a behavioral perspective, there are many reasons why this is the case. And once you can see a new perspective on why this is a challenge for retired athletes, you can take actions to successfully set and achieve non-sport goals. In the world of applied behavior analysis, or ABA, there's a lot of strategies to address these very things that I'm going to talk about. Your girl here, a licensed and board certified behavior analyst, is going to give you some of those reasons and talk about why they're specific to former athletes. And then I'm going to tell you what you can do about it. So let's go. One of the factors causing this divide between setting sport and non-sport goals is a lack of generalization. So in a behavioral world, this word has a slightly different meaning than how it's used in everyday language. So for our purposes here, generalization is going to be defined as taking something you learned in a certain situation or environment and being able to use it across new situations or new environments. In the world of ABA, there are many reasons why a skill might not generalize. So let's talk about those relative to retiring from sports. Sports have a clear definition of progress and success, whether it's qualifying for a certain level, winning a tournament or a championship, placing in the top tier, achieving a PR or a score. And the list goes on, right? And these things are naturally built into competitive sports. And athletes have this community of coaches and teammates and others supporting their goal development and achievement. And the more time you spend in a sport, which often is many, many years, the more you learn about what your potential is and what you want to achieve. So you come out of this having a very good sense of what you can achieve. Competitive sports provided structure in your life when you're an athlete, from training sessions, competitive schedules, to accountability to your coach, your teammates, yourself. And that gave you a clear path on what you wanted to accomplish and how you were going to do it, and lots of opportunities to work on it. Being in that world gave you what you needed to set and accomplish these goals. So all of these factors that I just talked about create an environment that helps you set and achieve goals in your sport. When you retire, that environment, that support system, that structure, that accountability is gone. And suddenly you're faced with an abundance of free time and a lack of direction and support system, which can be really disorienting and overwhelming. So herein lies the challenge. And skills that we learn, like goal setting and achievement, more easily generalize from one environment, which would be your life in sports, to a new environment, your post-sport life, when there are common things in those environments. So hypothetically, this is not a real life scenario, but hypothetically, let's say your former coach all of a sudden becomes your boss at work. And that person knows you really well. They know your strengths, and they can help you set goals at work that are achievable because of the knowledge they have about you. They're this common thread between environments. And so when you have that, it makes it easier for you to generalize your goal setting skills. But we all know that's not realistic, and your coach is probably not going to become your boss at work. In addition, it's probable that the goals that you have set and work towards in your life have been mainly sports goals or maybe school goals, but you haven't had the opportunity to use the skill of goal setting and achieving in these multiple aspects of your life. When skills are learned in different ways and in different environments and across situations, they're easier to transfer to other areas. But as an athlete, you didn't really get that opportunity. So how can you generalize this skill to life after sports? Let's talk about that. This is one of the more challenging factors to address because setting non-sport goals happens after you've developed the skill of setting sport goals. In behavior analysis, ideally, you would plan for generalization ahead of time and incorporate these plans into the learning process so that generalization occurs more naturally and easily later to new situations. But we don't have that opportunity as former athletes. We weren't planning for generalization of this skill while we were competing in our sport. So even though there was no planning for generalization, there are still strategies that can be used to support generalization after the fact. So like I mentioned a little bit ago, the more common elements between circumstances where you learned a skill and the one where you want to generalize it, the better. So what you can do is identify and incorporate areas of strength that you have, like good time management skills or discipline, or other things that helped you achieve your goals as an athlete, and incorporate those into your goals in your life after sports. And that can really help bridge that gap between then and now. Additionally, if there are any tools that you use to work towards your sport goals, so things like charts or motivational reminders, checklists, etc., you can find ways to adapt and use those for your non-sport goals. So using some of those same strategies that worked for you before in a different way can help with that generalization of skills. Another way you can generalize goal setting and achievement is to start with goals that are similar to the ones you had in your sport. Now, you may need to get a little creative with this one, but there's often common ground in what you want to accomplish outside of sports. For example, maybe you want to maintain a certain physical skill that you had as an athlete, or maybe you want to keep a certain schedule for physical activity, or something else similar to that. And so even if this is not the ultimate goal that you have that you want to achieve, it's not, the bigger picture, starting with a goal like that is something that's familiar, and it can give you the reinforcement and the momentum to then go bigger from there once you achieve that other goal, the smaller goal that's similar to your sports goal. So I have one more strategy for generalization that I want to talk about, and that is enlisting a coach. You may have heard this advice before, but I want to talk about why this is an effective strategy from a behavioral and generalization perspective. Because once you understand the why behind a strategy, you're more likely to do it right and to be successful with it. So let's talk a little bit about why this is a really helpful and effective strategy. As an athlete, you had a coach guiding you, giving you feedback, reminding you what you needed to do, helping you structure your time. It was somebody to be accountable to. And there's a good chance that all of this helped you achieve what you wanted. Now that you're retired from your sport, this support is no longer there to help you along. Athletes tend to be very intrinsically motivated, but we can't ignore the fact that there are also supports in place, like coach and teammates, to help you make progress. It's often not just, your internal drive to do it, which is probably a big part of it, but there was also some support outside of that helped you get where you needed to go. So having a coach guide you in achieving your next goals in your life after sports is a very effective way to generalize the skill to your life. A coach can be someone that specializes in what you want to achieve, or specializes in working with former athletes. Or it could even be your best friend or someone else that will help you structure the steps to achieving your goal and hold you accountable. Having a community of people that are working towards similar goals, like your former teammates, can also be a common element from your sports days that provides that outside support. So joining group coaching programs where everybody is working towards a similar goal can be a really nice element that closes that gap. So another reason why goal setting is more challenging for former athletes after they retire is that the motivation to achieve goals is different for sport versus non-sport goals. So simply put, as humans, we engage in all sorts of behaviors, and we are more likely to do certain behaviors more if the result is something that we really enjoy. And that's called positive reinforcement, and it's powerful. This can vary widely for people. What's motivating for one person may not be motivating for another person, but the level of positive reinforcement that you receive from, let's say, hitting that PR or winning that league championship can be very different from the level of positive reinforcement that you will receive from meeting a goal that's unrelated to your sport. So I want to talk a little bit about the different types of positive reinforcement. Like I mentioned before, athletes are often intrinsically motivated. And what this means in the behavior analysis world is that the motivation comes from inside you. And you do something because you like it, like the feelings it produces or the sensations that it produces. Maybe you enjoy how your body feels after a good hard workout, or the joy or other emotions that you experience when you achieve something. So that's that internal, intrinsic motivation. There's also extrinsic motivation involved. And these are outcomes from the world outside of you. So in sports, it's going to be things like the roar of the crowd in the bleachers, or that medal around your neck, or the article written about you and your team, or the celebration that you have following a victory. And chances are that athletes' motivation to accomplish a sport goal is both intrinsic and extrinsic. The outcome of a non-sport goal still may be motivating, but you're not going to have the crowd cheering for you, a trophy to raise on the podium, public recognition, or your team rushing the field. So if the positive reinforcement from a non-sport goal is not as powerful, it's more challenging to do the behaviors you need to achieve that goal. So getting some praise from your boss, or hitting your macro count for the day and getting a badge on your app is probably not as powerful as the reinforcers that you got from your sport. So this is important because the more powerful the reinforcer, the more you're willing to do to get it. So continuing to work hard toward a non-sport goal is less likely to happen if there's a less powerful reinforcer. So let's talk about how to use positive reinforcement in an effective way for your non-sport goals. So let's look at it from the intrinsic motivation standpoint. And this is a little trickier because you can't really control what happens inside of you and how you feel about it, but you can become more aware of it and use it to your advantage. So think about the non-sport goal you want to achieve. And then think about and write down all the internal things that you enjoy about the steps you need to take toward achieving it. So I'll give you an example to get you started here. And this is an example from my life. So this is real. My goal is that I want to knit a sweater that I can wear. So to do this, I need to learn how to knit different stitches. I need to understand how to read the knitting pattern, get the right type and amount of yarn I need for the project, and then knit the sweater. So this might take a while because I'm a very beginning knitter. And what I think I will enjoy about this process is learning how to make other simple pieces while I learn new stitches. So you can't go right to knitting a giant sweater. You have to learn how to knit smaller, more simple things first. So I think that I will find enjoyment in that. I'll also enjoy watching that piece that I'm making grow in my lap as I knit it. Just that visual of, look at this thing I'm creating is going to be a positive reinforcer for me. I also know that I like to feel productive with my time. So I will like the fact that I can do this in the evening as I wind down with my family, but also be productive because I'm creating something tangible. So I could go on, but hopefully you get where I'm going. If I don't have any awareness about why this is enjoyable for me, other than a cool sweater I can wear and get compliments on, the process becomes less motivating and I'm less likely to keep it up because that sweater is a long ways away. But if I'm experiencing these other enjoyable things along the way, I'm more likely to, let's say, establish a routine of at least 3 evenings per week working on my knitting. So spend some time thinking about that. and think about what you want to achieve and what you are going to find intrinsically motivating along the way. As far as an extrinsic motivation, that's a little easier to incorporate. We all love a reward or a treat. Sometimes those reinforcers or those rewards can be naturally built in to working towards a goal. So in my example above, knitting a sweater, I will end up with a scarf that I made for myself while I'm learning the stitches on that simpler project. So I will find that scarf reinforcing. It's something I made and I'll get to wear it. And there will be some extrinsic motivation along the way as I'm learning. There are also reinforcers that we can build in for accomplishing steps towards our goal or the bigger goal itself. So here's where you can get creative. So, for example, maybe if you finish a project at work that you've been working on, you stop at your favorite smoothie shop on the way home, right? And that's your reward for finishing the project. That's your reinforcer. Or maybe you get to buy that shirt you've been eyeing for meeting a certain milestone that you set for yourself. So these are all examples of those external reinforcers. The important thing about external reinforcers is that they need to be effective. If I make a smoothie for myself every morning at home, then maybe the one from the smoothie shop isn't going to be enough to push me to finish that work project. You can like something without it being an effective reinforcer. So you might like it, but maybe it's not enough for you to work for it. So these are important things to keep in mind when you're looking at reinforcers and using that external or extrinsic motivation. So it should be something that you don't regularly have that you use, right? Because if you get something all the time, like the smoothie, there isn't that motivation to work for it. So spend some time writing down things that are highly motivating that you are willing to work for. It's also good to explore some new options. Seek out new opportunities that could be reinforcers in the future, right? Try out some different things. Go to some different places. See what you find that can be motivating for you. Another effective strategy to combine with external reinforcers is self-monitoring or self-management. So this means that you're keeping track of your progress on a frequent basis. Tracking can be on an app, a checklist, a chart, or any other means that you'll remember to use. The important thing is that you remember and you are actively keeping track of your progress. Monitoring your own actions and behaviors brings awareness to what you're doing and keeps you present so that you can continue to take actions towards your goals. For many people, checking something off or seeing visual progress is a reinforcer and will likely increase the likelihood that they will keep that behavior up. This is another area where you can get creative and do what you know works best for you. There's so much technology out there to help keep you on track, from reminders to to-do lists to counters. There are so many ways your phone can help you live your best life. So use those tools that you have at your disposal. And hopefully this will also help decrease that frequent scrolling on our phones that's taking you away from what you want to accomplish by using that tool for moving forward instead. So the final thing I want to talk about as far as factors that can impact our ability to set non-sport goals is avoidance. So let's be real. People like to do things that they are good at. And athletes take that to a whole nother level. As an athlete, you spend a lot of time perfecting your skills so that you could be the best possible version of yourself in your sport. It's the result of that, or the consequence in behavioral terms, that keeps you training and competing. Consequence sometimes has a negative connotation to it in everyday language. Like we think of, ooh, he did something bad, he needs a consequence. But consequence in an ABA world really just means anything that happens following something you do. So consequences can be good, bad, neutral, or anything in between. So accomplishment in your sport is a good consequence, or also known as positive reinforcement, that follows your training and your hard work that keeps you doing it. That's what positive reinforcement does. It makes it more likely that you'll continue to do the actions or the behaviors that it follows. The idea of working hard to be mediocre, or dare I say bad at something, might be your worst nightmare as a former athlete. Or maybe it's not that bad, but it's definitely less motivating than working hard to excel at something that you're already good at, like you did in sports. As humans, not just athletes, we spend a lot of time paying attention to our mind telling us all of the bad possible outcomes of our actions, all those potential bad consequences. This is what minds do. The intention of our mind here is honorable. It's to help us stay away from danger and things that could potentially harm us physically and emotionally. And we often listen to our mind and avoid things that may be uncomfortable or cause suffering. But in the world we live in now, if we continuously avoid things that could potentially result in emotional suffering, we may never leave the house or do anything outside of our comfort zone. So working toward new goals to accomplish things that are less familiar and potentially uncomfortable with a chance of failure can be a very scary idea, especially to a former athlete who is used to excelling at what they do. You may have experienced failure as an athlete, but you had a whole network of support to pick you up off the ground and get you back on that field. That generalization strategy of having a coach and a community, right? They're helping support us to stay or get back on track. So the mere idea of failing or being bad at something and the emotional uncomfortableness that comes with it may lead you to avoid putting yourself in that situation to begin with. And avoidance is clearly something that can have a negative impact on accomplishing a goal. Working past avoidance can be a very big challenge. And a lot of what I focus on in my services for retired athletes is working through avoidance and past it. In fact, I will soon have a whole course on it. But for now, here are some takeaways that you can implement. So the first strategy is using SMART goals. And this may sound familiar to you, as this tool is used across many areas. And that's because it's effective. So make your goals SMART goals. If you haven't heard this before, let me break it down really quick. SMART is an acronym, and S stands for specific, M is measurable, A is achievable, R is relevant, and T is time bound. So let me say a little bit more about each one, but you can definitely do a quick Google search on this and you will get plenty of information on how to set a SMART goal. But so S specific means make your goal clear, narrow, and defined so that you know exactly what you need to do to accomplish it. If your goal is vague, you may not even know when you've met it, and it may make it more challenging to work towards it. Measurable. This makes it possible to track and monitor your progress, like I talked about above as a strategy. So know the how much or the how many of your goals and how you know when you will have accomplished it by making it measurable. Achievable. Make your goal something that pushes you but is reasonable and able to be accomplished in your current environment or circumstances. The last thing you want to do is set yourself up for failure with something that's not possible to do in the current moment. So make your goal achievable. R is relevant. So your goal should be something that matters to you and supports your values so that you are maximizing that intrinsic motivation for working toward it. We'll talk a little bit more about values in a minute. And T for time bound. So set a deadline or a target date for your goal and make it reasonable. Having a deadline increases your focus on the steps you need to take along the way and prevents you from getting lost in the everyday stuff, which is a form of avoidance. So that keeps you on track for your longer term goals. Another strategy for ensuring that you are making progress and working past avoidance is to break your goal down into smaller steps. It is so much easier to take a small 5-minute action that takes you closer to what you want than to set this enormous goal with no smaller steps in between so that you don't even know where to start. And then end up avoiding working towards that goal. Checking off those smaller steps on your self-monitoring tools feels good, and it keeps you motivated to accomplish the next one. So, can you see how this is all tying together? All of these strategies are working and complementing each other. So, finally, let's talk about values. This could also be an entire course in of itself, and it probably will be one day with the Vintage Athlete. But there are ways to get clear on your values now. Values are different from goals, but they go hand in hand and support one another. A value is a chosen path that you find meaningful and important. It's a principle of what you want to stand for and what you want to live by. So values are not the same as goals. Values are directions we keep moving in, where goals are what we want to achieve along the way. There's no accomplishing a value. You can't complete it. But you can work toward and accomplish goals in service of living according to your values. But values are this ongoing path in life that guide you to act in meaningful ways. So when you're clear on your values, the goals that support them are easier to set and achieve. So that's why it's important to get clarity on what your values are. There are many tools out there to do a values assessment. So again, a quick Google search should get you there. But some examples of values are growth, loyalty, balance, citizenship. So values are the principles that you want to describe what kind of person you are. So get clear on your values in life after sports, and your goals will follow. So in conclusion, there will always be more factors in a retired athlete's life than just the ones I talked about. So it's not always that simple. But as a behavior analyst and a former athlete, I can tell you that a lot of behavior comes down to these factors that we talked about: generalization, reinforcement, and avoidance. And get in the way of setting and accomplishing goals outside of your sport, especially as a former athlete. So if you can recognize them in yourself and then implement the behavioral strategies that are effective in addressing them, you'll be in a much better place to set and develop a plan for accomplishing non-sport goals. So rather than getting stuck in the frustration of struggling to set and achieve these non-sport goals, taking a behavioral approach helps you be more objective about your goals and what actions to take and how to take them. As you may have experienced, not everything comes as naturally as being good at your sport. And that's okay, because you are a human being and you don't have to be amazing at everything to be an amazing human. But you can absolutely take what your sport has taught you and your strengths as a person to achieve meaningful and impressive goals in your life after sports. So that is it for today and for today's episode. I do want to encourage you to check out my free 3-day experience. You can find it on my website. It's called the Vintage Athlete Awakening. And if you are looking to gain a little more clarity about what's important to you, what those values are, and the steps that you can take towards them, please sign up for that. It's a 3-day experience. Each day comes with an exercise that works toward that clarity. And so if you want to get a little taste of what these strategies look like, please go to the link in the show notes for the Vintage Athlete Awakening and sign up. Well, that's all I have for today. So thank you. And I really, really look forward to talking to you on the next episode. And until then, keep evolving. You have officially crossed the finish line of this episode of the Vintage Athlete Podcast. Congrats. I hope you're feeling empowered to live your best life after sports. And remember, you are not alone in this journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback not only helps improve this podcast, but also helps other retired athletes find our community. Stay connected with me on Instagram at vintage.athlete for daily tips, inspiring stories, and to share your own experiences. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for being a part of the Vintage Athlete team. Together, let's continue to find balance, build fitness, and redefine success in this exciting new chapter. I'm Tara Fortier, and I can't wait to connect with you again next time. Until then, keep evolving and keep creating your legacy beyond the game. Take care, and see you next time on the Vintage Athlete Podcast.